My name's Steve Higgins. I'm Professor of Education at Durham University. My involvement with the Research Schools Network is quite complex because I work mainly with the Education Endowment Foundation as the developer of the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, but also advise them on their evaluation strategy around trials. But my connection with this particular network, again, is quite complex. I've known James Siddle for a few years. We started corresponding about the toolkit, and that started to involve me in some of the research work around digital feedback in the area, and then that led me to have a kind of specific connection with the Kyra network. Practitioners engaging with research is kind of a central core of how we start to develop a system that's capable of self-improvement, and that for me is the goal of the research network. We've been through a period of time in education where we've tried to impose change through the strategies, and that has had some successes, but I think we're also now very aware of what the limitations are of that kind of approach. And we need schools to take ownership. That's not a particularly fashionable word, but we need them to take responsibility for effective and efficient means to bring about improvement. And their commitment to trying to find out what's going to be successful for their pupils is a key part of that. And I obviously think that research is a component in that that can help make that more efficient. Why start from scratch when there's an enormous amount of information out there that should help shortcut that journey? It won't give you a recipe for success, but it might give the ingredients that if you're a skillful cook, you can then create a more effective teaching and learning setting. Schools that use research tend to be characterized by a strong commitment to bringing about improvement. There's also usually a real focus on learning and making sure that the current framework around assessment and accountability doesn't distort too much the quality of what happens within schools. And then there's also what I think is an inquiry focus, where they're actually keen to find out, challenge themselves and bring about improvements and take responsibility for that. And that has its risks, because of course at that point you've got to be prepared to make mistakes and to be wrong. And in the current climate, it's difficult to do that publicly, because you've got to open yourself up to trying things that might not succeed and be honest about the impact, rather than presenting whatever you do as successful. And that, I think, is a challenge in the current accountability climate. But we need schools that will engage and honestly identify what's successful, what's not, stop doing things that are less successful, and pursue the things that have greater promise. And that's where, again, I think research offers a way that schools can do that, where they can use research as a starting point and don't have to take all of that responsibility. They can engage with the research and move forward on that basis. We're at a very difficult time, I think, in terms of how schools are organised structures and communicate with each other. So we're seeing greater fracturing in the local systems, and I think that puts quite a lot of pressure on schools in terms of how vulnerable they feel. So that's one of, I think, the pressures. I think potentially the research schools offer a way of schools networking and helping each other, so that might actually prove to be a benefit in the long run. Another real challenge at the moment, I think, is finance. Changes in school funding mean, I think, there's huge pressure on schools in terms of, for some, even basic things like staffing. Research might feel like a luxury, and it's quite difficult, I think, to justify the time. So schools need to see some reward or payback from their research engagement in a way that they value. The other, as I mentioned before, is very much around it's potentially high risk, because not everything's going to work, and it's a mistake to assume that everything you try is going to be successful. It's never been my experience in life. Having a climate where that's okay, but perhaps where you can more clearly justify what you stop doing is an area where that might help schools in the long run, but I do see that as a high risk. You've got to be prepared to take risks and accept that you might fail. The other area where there's a challenge, I think, is just in terms of capacity around thinking about research. Engaging in and being critical of research is an important starting point, I think. It's never going to give you answers and kind of quick solutions. There's often a lot of complexity in what a research finding actually means and in terms of how you apply that. So I think developing skills and understanding of research and its limitations will also be necessary as schools start to engage. I'd hope that that also then encourages them to try things out themselves and test them more rigorously, and that engagement in itself might help, but that also is going to be a challenge. So I see lots of challenges, but a lot of potential gain in the long run. I'm well aware at the moment that the schools we work with are those who are enthusiastic and interested in what we're doing. I do think there's a challenge at the moment in the current system as to how you make sure that all schools have that opportunity and have the capability of engaging in research. I think the research schools clearly are going to lead by example, and hopefully, if they're successful, that will pull people in. I think also some schools will find themselves struggling on their own, so will want to be part of networks, and the research networks may be a structure that will encourage them to buy into that or to join those networks. But I think also in an area like this, there are also practical problems like geography, how far away you are, how easy it is to network. If you're in Tower Hamlets, you've probably got 3 schools within walking distance. In Lincolnshire, your nearest school might be 35 minutes drive away. So I think there are some other challenges around just the physical geography in different parts of the country for the networks. But I hope that the success of the networks will be what drives their increasing engagement with a wider range of schools. I think if we're successful in terms of research engaged schools, what we'll see is quicker movement towards progress. So you'll have quicker iterations of people trying things out and success being achieved more quickly. So if you take something like marking, we're definitely going to see changes in the amount of time schools allocate to that. If people use the findings from research and then try research and inquiry in schools, we should get to the point at which we're more secure in the policies that we implement on the basis of that trial and improvement. Whereas if you start without a research background, I think there's a kind of a random set of things you might try, some of which will be productive and others which won't. So for me, it's about the efficiency of the process of engaging in research and then developing the skills and capability so those loops, if you like, those feedback loops become tighter from research to inquiry, testing and experimentation to the development of more efficient teaching and learning approaches. That's an aspiration. I'm not sure I can guarantee that that's what's going to happen, but that's my vision for what I think we can achieve.